by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Welcome to Game Over Montreal, and just like we all expected, somebody whispered into the ear of the Winnipeg Jets this morning that it was the 2021 Stanley Cup playoffs, and it felt a lot like that playoff round between the Montreal Canadiens and the Winnipeg Jets, where everyone expected the Jets to stomp the Canadiens, and the Canadiens came out and clowned on them for 4 straight games. Connor Hellebuyck wasn't able to stop the dynamic force that is, as requested of me by the chat already, Daddy, the nickname for Evgeny Dadadnov, apparently, from the Montreal Canadiens Twitter account. They call him Daddy, so we'll call him Daddy too. We have a great show for you tonight. Rachel Doerrie is going to join the show. It's going to be super fun. We're going to get into some nitty-gritty stuff. We're going to talk about some prospects, and we're going to talk about this crazily entertaining game from start to finish from your Montreal Canadiens. But before we get too deep into it, think you know the way it's going to go? Make your bet with Sports Interaction. Whether it's hockey, football, or basketball, Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pre-game, live in play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. All right, let's welcome in Rachel. How are you today, Miss Doerrie?
I'm doing well. I've got good Wi-Fi today, just like the Montreal Canadiens. So things are on the up and up. How are you?
I'm doing great because I expected, after a few pretty good games from the Montreal Canadiens, after losing Jake Evans, Yoel Armia, and Uri Slavkovsky, having a bunch of kids called up today from the Laval Rocket against the best team in the West, that this was going to be, a 5, 6, 7-1 kind of game. And it wasn't. I thought it might have gone that way when Kyle Connor scored first, because Kyle Connor always kills the Montreal Canadiens. But no, this was a very, very good game from a team that has been playing very well, and maybe a Jets team that didn't take them seriously for the first 50 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was also a super entertaining game, like you said. I felt like it was almost river hockey, and the Montreal Canadiens out hockeyed or river hockeyed the Winnipeg Jets. And for me, I think you and I are similar. We really like fun hockey. And when you have injuries, you've got to call up kids from the minors. You usually get some mistakes, and that leads to fun hockey. But I thought on the whole, Montreal absolutely deserved to win tonight. They were the better team. It's not like Winnipeg won on the back of Connor Hellebuyck or Montreal won on the back of Sam Montembeault. Like, I really just thought that the game went like minute 5 to minute 55. That was pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And, I always approach this from like a realist perspective. I don't need to come in here and pump the Montreal Canadiens up if they play poorly. We'll say it, but this was a really strong performance against a team that should have been able to knock the Canadiens into next week, right? We talked on the show recently about how the Canadiens, one of their big struggles has been teams that forecheck heavily. They really struggled against the Seattle Kraken, and they really struggled against the New York Islanders. The Jets are a pretty strong forechecking team, a good cycle team, maybe better at cycling than forechecking, but teams that are able to create long offensive zone possessions get the Canadiens running around, and the Jets just weren't able to do that tonight. So as much as I want to give a lot of credit to the Canadiens overall, I have to take away some credit from the Jets because they did not bring it tonight.
I agree with you. I think you're probably right in that they took them maybe a little bit lightly. I've watched quite a bit of the Winnipeg Jets just because I think that they've been one of the teams to kind of watch this year, especially when they were doing it without Scheifele. Obviously, Josh Morrissey's been great for them this year. I really think that they just came in and kind of thought that they were, no matter how they played, whether it was river hockey or their regular Winnipeg Jets kind of structure hockey, that they were going to be able to win. And that just wasn't the case. And I think a big reason for that is Winnipeg is one of those like bigger, more heavy teams when you think about it. And tonight they got exposed because Montreal's speed completely outmatched them outside of the top line where you've got Dubois, Ehlers, and Connor. And I'm sure we'll talk about Pierre-Luc at some point. But I thought Montreal completely outskated them, and that can really interrupt something like the cycle, because your ability to jump plays, if you could read the play, um, is there when you have that team speed. And so for me, that was one of the keys in this game.
Yeah, and in like recent seasons, I would say that physical aspect of the Jets would essentially go unanswered by the Montreal Canadiens. But something that you mentioned before the show that you wanted to talk about, and that he gave us a reason to talk about him, Arber Xhekaj. Whether you're calling him Wi-Fi or the Jackhammer or the Sheriff, he was huge tonight. I believe before the Jets kind of like wound it up at the end at the score effects. I don't know at the end of the day what his yeah, okay. He led the Canadiens in possession. So, again, a really strong game from him. I know he was playing with Mike Matheson, which probably helps a fair amount in terms of carrying the puck through the ice. But from the beginning of the game, he was continually lining up Lowry for whatever reason. He just keyed in on Adam Lowry, and then at the end of the game, Lowry tried to get back at him after he went at Scheifele, and they had a little tussle there, two big guys. But Arber Xhekaj continues to show no fear of reprisal in taking numbers and taking guys out.
This guy's going to be, if he's not already, a complete fan favorite. Even after his fight with Adam Lowry, you see him going like this with the logo. That's going to endear you to the fans immediately in Montreal. And you show you're proud to wear that uniform, and they're going to jump on the train. But I think Arber Xhekaj is kind of this case where his development was really hit hard by the COVID pandemic. He wasn't able to play. He was working at Costco. And Montreal was able to identify that he had certain traits. And when I talk about certain traits, I'm talking about the off-ice stuff. Everybody knew he could skate while he was in Kitchener, and everybody knew he had a big booming shot. It wasn't a secret. But I think it speaks to Montreal's research off the ice that they knew that they had found something here for Adam Nicholas to work with, to turn into the player he's become. Arber Xhekaj, like, I remember reading scouting reports on this guy, and every single team to me that was interested in him was a team that had actually sat down and interviewed him and talked to him about his work ethic and the things that he believes in. And the fact that Montreal kind of won the race for him, I think is a testament to the fact that, one, they've really beefed up the development program, and two, that he's gotten in the lineup this quickly is another testament to the fact that it's working. And so Montreal's really showing that they know what to do with young players now. They're not going to rush guys. I'd probably play Slavkovsky in the AHL, but with Arber Xhekaj, it's found money. It was free. And for me, I think he's a fantastic fit there. It's probably not going to be very cheap for very long. So probably should enjoy that while you can.
Yeah, and credit where it's due. That was actually a Bergevin move, getting Arber Xhekaj. I don't know if he'd necessarily develop the same pathway if Bergevin was still in charge, considering they didn't develop a defenseman for 10 years. But hey, Caden Gooley, Jordan Harris, Arber Xhekaj, they were all technically Bergevin moves at one point or another. So kudos to Mark Bergevin for rebuilding the Canadiens defense, and Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton taking advantage of it and making the best out of those players. Xhekaj, there were comments here saying he picked a guy early and just stuck with him. It's true. And there's Trizak in the comments is just like continually trying to get me to call Dadonov daddy. And he's saying, I should say, thank you, daddy. Dadonov. Jesus, this is already off the rails.
We've been going for like 10 minutes and we're just well off the rails already.
Yeah. Getting way off the rails completely here. But it was an extremely fun game. And I feel like that whole, pulling the jersey thing, and I'll do the same thing for SDPN, it kind of brings it back to, I don't know if you watched it at all, Rachel, but when PK Subban was honored by the Canadiens, which was this, like, it was 100% a PR move, right? They're not retiring his jersey.
And they shouldn't.
They're not. And no. I mean, he wasn't here long enough to get that kind of honor for the Montreal Canadiens, but it was such a smart move because it brings him back into good graces within the organization when there was a relationship that was fractured there. And it kind of like heals old wounds in the fan base, which, like, being part of the whole Montreal thing, I noticed from both myself and people around me on the internet that the fan base after that trade was shattered. Probably not quite in two, but there was a huge percentage of the fan base that was just like not following anymore. And I got tons of messages, tons after that game where PK came back, where people were like, that's all I needed. That was closure for me. I can come back and be a fan now. I can cheer for this team and not feel guilty about it, that I'm like, turning my back on PK Subban, who like brought me into the game. People who are people of color who didn't really care about hockey before, who are attached to it now. But it also had ripple effects on the team. That game against Nashville was probably, like, especially the start, the best they've played all season. And they've been continually playing well since that moment. And Arber Xhekaj doing the crest thing, that's a PK Subban move. So as much as people like to spread talk about how, like, players on the team didn't like him back then, I'll tell you one thing. The players on the team, they felt the presence and what it means to be a special player in this organization when he came back and got that standing ovation and saw, like, the words that he said in that speech. Uri Slafkovsky memorized a portion of the speech and, like, repeated it to reporters afterwards. Bringing back players that are special to the organization, even if it's just on the surface level PR, it matters.
It really does. And I think like in Montreal specifically, there is no hockey team that does pomp and circumstance like Montreal, and they do it really well. And for me, like, the way that PK Subban trade happened, I thought it was really poor. And the whole Michel Therrien 0005 thing, that was absolute nonsense. Like, there was just a lot of it that screamed not great. And I'll call it what it is. It seemed like thinly veiled racism.
There was some dog whistles going on.
Yeah. And especially when PK Subban was so good in the community and is still an active member in the Montreal community, I think it's really important that as an organization, Montreal brings him back to allow fans to celebrate him. And even, like, Carey Price, I haven't been able to say this because the situation that I've been in the last few months, but I really thought that Montreal did a fantastic job bringing Carey Price out for the home opener. And then to do it again and to allow that 0005 to occur in front of everybody, give everybody that kind of, like, last chance to see that, because we may never see Carey Price in a Montreal uniform again. I thought that was really well done. And whether it was marketing or whoever, it was a very good decision. Because, like you said, there were people of color who kind of felt like they couldn't be fans or they shouldn't be fans. And this is kind of a way to say, you know what, we understand we messed that up. We're a new regime and we're going to fix that. It's not dissimilar to kind of what other hockey organizations have done to bring in players who have been hard done by the organization by previous ownership or previous management. I thought it was really well done. And like you said, they came out absolutely flying against Nashville, flying against them. And they've kind of just kept it. And I think what it does, Andrew, is you have a bunch of young players on that team, right? You've got Nick Suzuki, you've got Cole Caufield, Uri Slafkovsky, Arber Xhekaj, like Jordan Harris, Justin Barron. Then you go on and on. And all it does is show them and motivate them. Hey, if I'm this good in Montreal, look how you get treated.
Yep.
You're treated like a king. So,
especially if you're giving back to the community, right, and being involved and all that, it makes a difference. There was a comment in the chat from Kay saying the last 0005 made me cry. Not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit emotional during that whole ordeal, especially when PK brought, like, Mila out and had the crowd chanting her name. The fact that he made his moment about a kid who needed to be lifted up, just never change, PK. Never change.
And I also never, ever, like, I've worked obviously in hockey and I worked for an organization that he played for. This nonsense about it's all about PK Subban, he's a selfish guy, like this, that, and the other. Do you think somebody who's selfish makes their return to Montreal about a kid if they're really a selfish person? I don't think so. So I don't really want to hear that anymore. You're telling on yourself at that point, in my opinion.
For sure. All right, we'll move on from PK just because I feel like we could continue talking about that for an hour and a half and people will be like, what about the game? I will say, one person that I really want to shout out tonight, and I don't think he necessarily stole the game because the Canadians gave him the run support to close it down, but Sam Montembeault, over his last 3 games, has gone head-to-head with Sorokin, Shesterkin, and Hellebuck. And over that time, he has a .952 save percentage. And watching Montembeault last year, and I still think he's a little bit chaotic at times, but compared to last year, the step he's taken, and I know part of it is not having a hand that needs surgery, but it's the control in his skating, his ability to look through traffic to find pucks. He has taken such a huge step. And, small sample size, of course, you're not going to look at these 3 games and say, like, oh, well, he's as good as those guys. No, not at all what I'm saying. And small sample size this season entirely, right? He hasn't played that many games.
Yeah, you're also not being like Vezina.
Exactly, right? We're not taking it to that level. But from what I'm seeing from Montembeault this season, I'm seeing a very solid NHL goaltender who could maybe be a 1B in a good situation. I think that's found money for the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I think Montembeault is at a minimum right now with what he's shown this season, a capable backup. He's absolutely shown that he is a capable backup. Whereas when he originally came in, it was like, whoa, what is going on here? But he's shown that he can take those steps. And once again, the Montreal development staff deserves a ton of credit for that. And I think so does Martin St. Louis, because the quickest way to ruin a goaltender, and especially a young one, and let's face it, he is a French Canadian in Montreal, so it happens a lot quicker. The quickest way to do that is to throw him to the Wolves. And I thought that St. Louis has done a really good job of protecting him. Even though Montreal has not been a good team, he has done a good job of not putting him in situations that are going to completely destroy his confidence and ruin his development. So I think the organization as a whole deserves a lot of credit. And it kind of goes to show you that when a player is healthy and maybe doesn't need surgery of any kind, that they're probably going to play better.
Yeah, that's true. And he gutted through it last season as a favor to the organization, essentially, because Caden Primo was the backup at that time. Jake Allen was injured, and Primo was like, man, he was getting shelled. It was sad to watch, Rachel. I felt so bad for the kid because he was clearly not ready, and the team was so bad that it was honestly just brutal to watch his confidence just get drained out of him. You could see it leaking into the ice. It was awful. So Montembeault just continued to play while injured, and the Canadiens went out and got the Hamburglar for a stretch there, and he actually played really well before they traded him, I think, to where did they trade him? New Jersey?
I feel like he retired, did he not?
He retired halfway through this season, a couple weeks ago, I think. I think he went to the KHL, and I guess they decided that it wasn't worth it to stay over there.
I'm not sure that I would want to be over there right now.
Me either. No, it'd have to be a whole lot of money. Life-changing money.
And even then, it's like, how do you even know you're getting it?
That's also true. But yeah, it's been a really fun journey to watch Montembeault go from a guy who looked like a deer in the headlights on a very terrible Montreal Canadiens team to really the calming presence on this relatively terrible Montreal Canadiens team, even though they're playing really well right now. We all know what they are. But aside from Montembeault,
they're playing themselves out of the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. Although,
you think so?
I think they are.
I don't think so.
But I also don't. Well, what I'm saying is they're not giving themselves the best shot at Connor Bedard. They're not going to finish last.
No, they're not going to. I mean,
right? So they are going to have to win a lottery with maybe 6 or 7% odds to get him. And so I don't think it's a negative though, because I think when you're in a situation that Montreal's in, where you have a guy like Nick Suzuki, Cole Caufield, Arber Xhekaj, Montembeault, you have these pieces, and you can't consistently say we're going to be bad, because then that destroys all of the progress that you've made with them.
Yeah.
Then you add in the fact that the draft this year is going to be really good. And so, yes, obviously everybody wants Connor Bedard, but if you pick in the top 4, you're going to be just fine. And even then, if you pick in the top 10, you are getting a better player than anybody last year. It's that deep. And that's not a knock on Slavkovsky or Shane Wright or anybody.
It's just a better draft year.
It's probably going to be the best draft for my money, at least since 2015, if not since 2003.
Wow, you go the 2003 route.
My model has way more not only players that are going to make it, but like impact and top 6 or top 4 defensemen expected in this draft than like any draft since 2003. That's how good this draft is. And I'm not saying that that's how it's going to go, but if this is the year where you can kind of afford to say like, okay, the player we're going to get at 10 is going to be still a really good hockey player, it's this year. As long as you don't step up and do something stupid, like, you'll be fine.
Yeah. I think everybody wants Connor Bedard, of course, right? Like, and I do think that it's a long season, right? I know the Canadiens have the toughest schedule of any team in the second half here. So they're going to lose some games, but they're not going to be able to get lower, I don't think, than like Arizona, who are 10 points behind them. It seems like pretty wild. But I expect Vancouver to pass them, coaching change notwithstanding. I know we're not going to talk about Vancouver. I expect San Jose to be in and around where they are, just because San Jose's underlyings continue to be pretty strong. And Montreal's are pretty terrible. And the special teams are pretty terrible too. So like, eventually they're going to go on a poor run, right?
I would say this. The caveat with San Jose is I would agree with you as it stands now. But if San Jose trades Carlson and or Meyer, all bets are off, because holy moly, you trade your top 2 scorers and you might as well just like not show up at that point.
That's true.
It would be, I think the Carlson move is obviously a lot harder to make, but I could absolutely see them moving Timo Meyer. And that is, you're taking your best forward out of the lineup. Like, that's a huge issue with any team. And so I think, you're kind of right. They're in that area. I would say I'd expect Montreal to pick between 7 and 11. They could use that lottery. They could move up. I just don't expect them to pick 1 unless all bets are off if any of Suzuki, Caufield kind of get injured long term, which I don't want to happen. Then everything's on the table.
And speaking of Caufield, he's just short of, this is the 82nd game under Marty St. Louis. So he scored 48 goals in those 82 games, just short of 50 for those counting at home. He almost got there, not quite. Pretty darn good.
I was told small guys can't play in the NHL though.
Yeah, especially when you're the one guy that every team keys on to check, right? Because it's not like the Canadiens have had secondary scoring for the rest of the season. And I know, hey, secondary scoring did it for them tonight. We all knew eventually the guys who were shooting 1% and 2% were going to get some goals, but it all happening at once was a little bit unexpected.
Yeah, and I think, like, is there a better coach for Cole Caufield than Martin St. Louis? Like,
no.
There's probably not, right?
I mean,
guy that has like the best career of any small guy in the last like generation coaching small. Like, it's a pretty good match made in heaven right there.
Like, I imagine at some point, if the Canadiens don't release some sort of like video of the two of them like walking around being best buds, like going to the gym together and doing like leg presses at the same time and like measuring who has the bigger tree trunk legs. Like, you got to do it. Give us something like to the two, to some like buddy cop drama or something that they can put together with the two of them. We need it. It's just fun. But
content.
Yeah, the great content. We're writing stuff for you, Montreal Canadiens. Just take it from us. I will say this: the trade bait that the Canadiens have is not high end for the most part this season, but I keep on hearing from every insider that Joel Edmondson is going to get a first round pick, and depending on the team, it's going to be a 2023 like lower end first round pick. So I look at the whole lower chance for number 1, and then you add the Florida pick, which I still think they're extremely unlikely to make the playoffs, even though their underlings are okay. There's the Paul Maurice factor, and they just have so many teams around them that they'd have to jump over. You know, like I expect the Senators to be better.
Is the best division in like we're not even having that discussion. Like it's so silly. It's so silly. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they're in tough.
it's just so much ground to make up, right?
Yeah. I think
And
this morning when I checked, they're like plus 180 to make the playoffs. Like, that's not good.
no, no, it's not. And you have those, like, if you have 3 picks in the first round, even if you're not getting Connor Bedard in this draft, that's a hell of a haul. If they make those picks and develop them well, and everything's an if until it happens, that's a pretty good start, especially after, like, I think the draft last year, I mean, I know
Oh,
Slavkovsky has not been amazing, but what the Canadiens pulled off in that draft in terms of prospects is very impressive.
yeah. Oh my gosh. I have not been able to say this publicly. Um, I think Montreal had one of the best drafts of all last year. Like Lane Hudson, disgusting. He's so good. He was one of my sons. Him and Seamus Casey. I was like, yes, please make this happen. I actually made a bet with somebody that Seamus Casey was going to go in the top 50, and he did. And then I bet that Lane Hudson was going to have a better season than a different defenseman that this particular person was advocating for ahead of him. I'm also currently winning that one. But like Owen Beck, great pick. I think getting Cedric Guedon late was also a good pick. That's a really good lottery card to have. Then you've got Philip Machar, I believe, and that pick, I thought he was taken a little bit too high, but I still think he's going to be a good NHL hockey player. And at that point, like, you're pretty happy with that. But like you said, if you're going to have two, you're definitely going to have two. But if you're going to have 3 first round picks this year, just don't Boston it. Just because you have 3 picks doesn't mean you need to reach for a dude. Like, don't do what New Jersey did. Like, just don't do that. Just make your list as if you have 1 pick, and then go up there and pick the guys as they go. And you know what? If the guy is 2 picks behind, then he's 2 picks behind. Maybe you trade back. But the Montreal Canadiens have a really good opportunity here to get a ton of prospect capital. I personally would not be giving up a first round pick for Joel Edmondson in the same way
No,
that
I
I
wouldn't
would
either.
not have done that for Ben Sherratt. Certainly not unprotected.
Oh god.
Yeah, like I got to be honest with you. If I'm a contender and I'm trying to get a piece that's probably going to help me, I'm going to spend my first round pick on a guy like Andrei Kuzmenko before I'm spending it on a guy like Joel Edmondson.
Yes,
But
100%.
you just absolutely know that Edmonton is not going to want to pay the price for Jacob Chikrin, even though they absolutely should. And they're going to end up trading for Joel Edmondson. Like, you just know that's going to happen.
And you know that the gap between what Jacob Chikrin would go for and what Joel Edmondson will go for is not big enough to cover the talent gap. And like,
No.
I've been kind of forgiving of Joel Edmondson recently because I feel like we have to put in context what's happening with him this season. Like, this is not the Joel Edmondson that we know over the last couple of years. And like, yes, he was carried by Jeff Petrie, but he was making quick decisions with the puck. He was a good support player. This season, he's just been really struggling to find his game with the back injury that he's been dealing with for over a year now, and losing his father last year. I mean, we don't know if that's a factor, but like, that can cause like all sorts of things in your life to go a little bit haywire, right? So I have a tough time giving too much criticism to the guy, but even at his best, a first round pick is a lot. And Jacob Chikrin is so much better than Joel Edmondson at his best that it's wild to balk at paying for that guy and be like, what? Well, we'll pay for like almost half as much for this guy. It's just, it's so Oilers that I expect it to happen. But apparently there's a bunch of teams in it, according to like LeBron and Chris Johnston.
And there's no reason not to believe that. Like, as somebody who like just came out of a front office, I 100% believe that he might get a first round pick. Like 100%. Like, I wish I could share some of the conversations that like I either heard about or was part of at the last trade deadline, because like my head almost exploded. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, oh, this player could garner this. I'm like, there is no chance of that happening. And then lo and behold, I'm like, what is going on? But supply and demand, right? There's not a ton of big men who skate and cross check in front of the net.
This is true.
There's also not a ton of Jacob Chikrin.
That's also true. Who is legitimately like one of those guys who's actually hard to play against.
Like
Like
if
he has a
I'm
great stick, good positioning, pushes the puck up the ice the right way.
I could totally see this being a scenario. You're gonna have contenders that want to add at the deadline. Edmonton's gonna be one of them. Toronto's gonna be one of them. Tampa's gonna be one of them, although the rumors are in that they're in on Luke Shen. I could see Winnipeg being one of them. And here's basically what's gonna happen. Everyone's gonna try and get the best guy available, which is obviously Jacob Chikrin, right? Then they might take a run at Erik Karlsson and whoever else might be. Then they might go to Luke Shen. And when they swing and miss on those guys, the Montreal Canadiens are going to be left with Joel Edmondson if they play their cards right. And then it's going to be a bidding war. And that's how they're going to get their first round pick. When teams swing and miss on the really big prizes, they circle back and inevitably end up overpaying. That's exactly what happened with Florida last year and Ben Sherratt. They wanted somebody else, missed, and ended up paying like
A bonkers price.
just a fireable offense price. And good on Kent Hughes for that. But like that is a fireable offense.
Yes, 100%. And if they miss the playoffs this year after making a coaching change that clearly didn't make the team better, it'd be hard to justify keeping the same people in charge in Florida right now. But before we close it out too much, there's a couple topics that the chat is asking for. First of all, I don't know if you saw this, Rachel, but somebody who watches the show, Thomas, tagged me in an article earlier today that I went through and read, and it was by an Oilers writer.
Oh,
like
no.
Edmonton media, and they suggested a trade for Jesse Puljujarvi to go to Montreal with...
That would be a great fit.
It would be a great fit with a 2023 first round pick, protected, lottery protected. So like at least that's smart. But Jesse Puljujarvi and the 2023 first for Joel Edmondson, and I believe it was like a 2024 first or like a 24 or maybe it was 24 second. But are Oilers media insane? Because what?
I can't even tell if that's serious or not, because I could guess that it came from like one of four people, and I'd probably be right. But
I
like,
have to look it up.
There is only one team, and I'm being dead serious. Like, I researched this. There is one team that is worse at developing forwards than the Edmonton Oilers, and it's the New York Rangers. Like, literally one team that is worse. And then you have Montreal, who has Adam Nicholas, who is one of the best development minds on this planet. And I have no doubt that if he got in the hands of Adam Nicholas or Darryl Belfry, that Jesse Puljujarvi would be a 50-point scorer within 2 seasons. I am being fully serious right now. I would, if I was Montreal, first of all, I don't know that I'd be giving up any first round picks at all for anybody, because that seems like a terrible idea. But in the case of Jesse Puljujarvi, if he could be had for a 4th or 5th round pick, I am making that like I'm sending Jeff Molson's plane to Edmonton so fast, like you wouldn't even be able to tell the tower on time at the Edmonton airport. Like it's a no-brainer for me. Jesse Puljujarvi for Joel Edmondson is absolutely something I would do, and I would not even think twice about it.
Oh,
like I would
100%.
call the NHL and be like, please do this before they say no.
Okay, Thomas put the actual trade here in the chat. He says there's 2 options. Option 1 is a lottery protected 2023 first round pick, Jesse Puljujarvi, and a 2024 5th round pick, or an unprotected 2024 first round pick, Puljujarvi, and a 2024 5th round pick for Joel Edmondson, a 2024 6th round pick, and the Canadiens retain $500K of Edmondson's contract. Do it now.
Trade would be worse than the Ben Sherratt trade.
Wow.
Like it, if not as bad, probably worse. Like you, no. And people say, oh, well, he hasn't had success with McDavid and Draisaitl, so like, how good can he be?
But like he has.
He literally has when he's played there. So I don't. But the problem is they won't leave him there. And Edmonton screwed up his injury. I think it was like 2 years ago so badly that he was like, "I'm gonna go play in Finland."
Yep.
Like, oh my gosh, no. But I absolutely would do Jesse Puljujarvi for Joel Edmondson, and then I would turn around and say that Montreal won that trade.
Yeah, you'd run as fast as you
Oh my
possibly
god.
could. I get big Val Nichushkin vibes from Jesse Puljujarvi, and I know it's not the exact same. I don't know if he has the wheels that Nichushkin has, but it's just like the big body, the defensive awareness, all the pieces are there. They just haven't put it together yet. And I feel like people are going to point to like Josh Anderson as like the big guy who has wheels and can shoot, but like Josh Anderson doesn't have the playmaking or the defensive awareness that Jesse Puljujarvi does.
No.
I feel like Puljujarvi is the type of guy that, given another organization with a bit more of a development mindset, he turns into like an actual really good power forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually think the Val Nichushkin comparison is a very accurate one. I think that's actually exactly in the mold of what he can turn into. I'm not going to sit here and suggest that he's going to be the key piece on a Stanley Cup winning team, but I think if you can get Puljujarvi some actual help, and I think people think development stops or like you hit your peak or whatever. There's a reason that old guys somehow seem to stay in the league, and it's because they continuously work with development guys to get better. That's kind of how that works. Like Erik Karlsson didn't accidentally just like get better this year. He did a ton of work. And I think if you do that with Puljujarvi on a cup contending team, he's probably a third line winger who, if there's injuries, can absolutely play a second line role.
Which is a valuable player. That's like on a cup contender. That's a big deal. Thinking of guys like Yanni Gord, right? I know he plays center, but guys who can jump up the lineup. They're big. They go for big money, right? Look at Blake Coleman in Calgary, what he did for the Lightning.
Barclay Goodrow signed to umpteen $1 million in New York.
That's not so great of a contract.
That is not fantastic. No.
No, it's not. And I guess the last one that we have to get to before I let you go, Rachel, is there's a lot of talk about Kirby Dach right now. He's back at center with the injuries that the Canadiens have, especially with Jake Evans getting hurt the other night, away from the Caufield Suzuki tandem. And he's killing it. He's absolutely crushing it. He's doing great work. And once again, just like when the Canadiens traded for Phil Deneau and a bunch of Blackhawks fans said, this guy sucks, perimeter player, doesn't know how to score, blah, 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 blah. Phil Deneau was a fantastic Montreal Canadian. Same thing happened with Dach. This guy's selfish, can't pass, terrible player. And Dach has arguably been, in terms of a total impact forward, not just offense, the Canadiens' best forward this season. The only caution that I have with the celebration of his play while he moves to center is like people look at Suzuki and Caufield's underlying numbers and they kind of crater without him. And yeah, he's a huge part of that line, but also those two guys are drawing the top lines every night. Like tonight, they were out there defending the lead with a minute left, and I know it was a 3-goal lead, but Suzuki and Caufield have a tough job and a lot of pressure on them. Whereas Dach, I think further down the lineup, even if it's just one line, a little bit easier, but I'm very encouraged by his play at center.
Yeah, so the Canucks hired Jeremy Colleton this summer to coach their AHL team. And I actually spent quite a bit of time with him in the lead up to kind of September, whatever. And I asked him about Kirby Dach because I was curious. Obviously, he coached him in Chicago. And then there was all of this hullabaloo at the draft about, and the Canucks were involved in that hullabaloo. But I asked him, I said, what do you think Dach turns into in Montreal? And he said that this is where I think he should play. And if they get his development right, there is a very real chance there's a 70-point forward there at some point. And I'm like, so you're telling me they just gave up on a guy who could have 70 points? And he goes, yep. I'm like, okay. And lo and behold, I think he got an assist tonight, like a beautiful play. Is that not 51 or 52 points?
The pace, I believe, is he was
Yeah,
on
like
pace
he's
for
on
50 points
pace.
before the game. Yeah.
So he's on pace for like 50-ish points. And this is his first year out of that situation. So I think, first of all, I think Jeremy Colleton's probably right. And at a very minimum, Kirby Dach and Montreal deserve a ton of credit for one, the situations like Martin St. Louis putting him in situations to succeed. He was not put in those situations in Chicago. Two, he's being insulated. He is not considered the savior of any franchise or anything. And three, I think they're doing a really good job of just letting him develop. I see that he's on the ice with Adam Nicholas, and then I see that he's on after practice, and I see that he's playing in various positions. And I think that it's a testament to the fact that he worked really hard this summer to earn those opportunities, but then that Montreal recognized that and said, we need to give him these opportunities. And it's paying off in spades. We're talking about a guy that's probably going to have 50 points this year. And he's still extremely young. Like, do not be surprised if this guy has 65 or 70 points at some point in his career.
Yeah, especially with a team that's a little bit better, right? I mean, that's like the continuing thing that I keep on talking about. Cole Caufield is like, yeah, he scored 48 and 82 with no one around him, really. I know he plays with Suzuki, but like, there's no one else on other lines to draw checks. Everyone
Like
can
I,
focus every game. Like, every pregame scout is like, okay, we got to stop this one guy. And he's
I
still
would say
doing
with
it.
Caufield, like, I don't think he's gonna score. Like, I don't think he's Ovechkin
Mm-mm.
or Matthews. Like, I don't think he's that. But I absolutely believe he's gonna score 50 in this league, and I think he'll be a consistent 40-goal scorer. I think he kind of falls along that scale where it's like, okay, he's scoring 40 every year, and like maybe a couple years he's got 52, 53, but most years he's probably like 47, 46 kind of area. And for a guy who I was told couldn't play in the NHL because he was a small, I think averaging like 40 plus goals a year counts as making it. So we're just going to go with that.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like he doesn't necessarily need to score more goals to be better, too, right? Like, he can round out other
No.
parts of his game by being a little bit more free on the ice. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit as well over
Yeah.
the last few weeks here. Justin Barron, 2.9 in front of his parents, says the chat. 100%.
Love
Great
that.
night for him. The Canadians named him first star after the game, too, which is like
That's
so
so
cheesy, but
nice.
I love it. It's so cute in front of his
Once
parents.
again,
That's great.
Montreal getting it right.
Yeah, just like, because 3 stars don't matter. Do it for
No.
fun. Do it for like emotions. That's great. I love it. Actually, before we go, we do have to talk about what we always have to talk about when the Canadians play the Jets is Pierre-Luc Dubois. We talked about it when we were chatting before the show. There was a bunch of questions about whether Pierre-Luc Dubois will be a Montreal Canadian when his contract is over. My question for you, Rachel, is does he fit, and do the Canadians even need him 2 years from now?
No and no. Although I'm 100% going to get screamed at because he's French and we need a quota of French players on the team. But the issue you have, so you have Nick Suzuki, right? And I don't think there's any denying. Like, is Nick Suzuki the number one center on a cup winning team? Maybe not, given that other teams have like McDavid. Someone's going to have Bedard at some point. Nathan McKinnon exists. Like, I think we can agree that those players are a step above Nick.
Yep.
But Pierre-Luc Dubois is not as good as Nick Suzuki. And Pierre-Luc Dubois is not only not as good as Nick Suzuki, he goes controller unplugged in his defensive zone far too often. He did it tonight
Yep.
on multiple occasions. And when you are somebody who is as large as Pierre-Luc Dubois is, you have the ability to be a dominant two-way center in this league. You just do. And there is no reason he couldn't be, but he's just not. And so he's going to command a ton of money, and there's going to be social pressures to get him to Montreal, and I'm pretty sure he wants to play there. But buddy, if you want to play in Montreal, like that contract cannot be more than $7 million.
Yep.
Like it just can't. Because on a cup winning team, Pierre-Luc Dubois is like probably a third line center or a second line winger because he's just not dependable enough in the middle for you to lock it down. And he's not offensive enough to be dominant on a cup winning team. So if Montreal is truly building a cup contender, I don't see where Pierre-Luc Dubois fits because I think Nick Suzuki fills the second line role on a cup winning team. And he's just a better option than Pierre-Luc Dubois is.
Yeah. And especially, I think, when you see the development of Kirby Dach here, right? It's like he signed for several more years at a relatively cheap rate. Like it already looks like a steal, that contract. So,
and he's probably that third line center, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So if you're spending second line money for Pierre-Luc Dubois, and he has to now outperform that, like where does he fit in the hierarchy if you're going to be a cup contender? Unless you have like the craziest defense core and like amazing wingers where you can have like a Suzuki, Dubois, Dach, three scoring line situation. I don't know, I just don't see any teams that are really built like that can number one afford to do that with the cap and like find those players to fit the right combination, right? It to me, I'm with you in the secret to the Canadiens getting to cup contending status is, as much as I think that Nick Suzuki could be a first line center in the NHL, you contend for a cup with him at 2C, and then you have a guy like Bedard, like a superstar, as your 1C. Yeah. They need to find that somewhere, whether it's this draft or like I don't know, Magic.
If Montreal gets one of Leo Carlsson or Adam Fantilli, there's your number one center. Like that's it, right? And you're not going to sit here and be like, I'd rather have Pierre-Luc Dubois because he's French. Would you rather have Pierre-Luc Dubois because he's French or a Stanley Cup? Like what? That's kind of and you see this with other teams too. It's like, oh, Toronto wants Toronto guys. Do you want Toronto guys or do you want a cup? Like, yeah. What are you doing here? You can't, as a management team, you can't have that. And I believe Nick Suzuki has made the commitment that he is going to learn French, and already is, or something like that. I just think that I understand Montreal's fan base. It is different. But if you want to win, I think the role of 2C has already been filled. And if you want Pierre-Luc Dubois as a winger, not more than $6 million.
Yeah. And like, frankly, I have nothing against finding great impact Francophone players or local players.
Either do I.
But you don't have to force it, right?
Right.
You don't have to shove a square peg into a round hole to fill that quota. I don't want to say quota is the wrong word, but I feel like every team, if they have their way, has a couple of local players who understand the city and the market more than like an average player would, right? Who bleed for that crest, who grew up fans of that team. It just puts it to the next level. You look at Mitch Marner in Toronto, and I know Toronto has a wealth of opportunity because Toronto is such a big city, Ontario is such a big population. But even like Ottawa has a ton of players from the Ottawa region.
Claude Giroux.
Yep.
Right? And you
look at him this year. They're terrible, and Claude Giroux is playing great.
Yeah, like there's something to absolutely. And do I think Pierre-Luc Dubois would probably be better in Montreal? Yeah, I do. I just don't think he'd be worth the $8-ish million that he's going to likely get. And I think it's better for the league and it's better for hockey when Montreal is good. In the same way that it's better for hockey when Toronto is good, when the Rangers are good, when the Bruins are good. Like, it's better. It just is. Everybody makes more money. TV people are happy. Everybody's happy because that's just kind of how it works, whether you like it or not. And if Montreal has a superstar French player, like, I so badly wanted them to get Alexis Lafreniere. Like, so bad. I wanted it. And I kind of think they could trade for him because he's another one of those players that the New York Rangers just have messed up royally.
Yeah.
And I think he could be had. And could you imagine if he hit in Montreal, the pandemonium that would cause? And he's a winger. He is somebody that you could probably just put on the other side of Caufield and Suzuki, and that would be an insane line. So for me, like if I'm Montreal, I'd rather go out and get Lafreniere. Like if I'm focused on getting a French player, a good one, that's the guy that I'm looking at.
Yeah, and you trust that, working with Adam Nicholas, you bring out what we saw from him in junior, right? And he's had
I have no doubt. Yeah,
his first 2 seasons in New York were okay. They weren't amazing, but they were okay. This year's shooting percentage is also a factor, right? But I know that his numbers overall have created a bit. But I wonder, what do you give up for Lafreniere? Do you give up Kirby Dach?
Well, I don't think that you're giving up Kirby Dach now. It's tough to say. The thing is Montreal's in such a great position from a prospect perspective that they could give up a prospect. You know what? They probably could give up a player off their roster. I don't know. Maybe New York wants Daddy, right? Maybe they want to get Dadonov because New York's trying to win now.
Who doesn't want Daddy, Rachel?
This is true. Everybody loves Daddy. New York's trying to win now. Like Panarin, Zibanejad, that Igor Shesterkin's pretty good. Adam Fox, pretty good. Like they're in their win now mode. And so if you give them someone who can help them win now, I think that's probably the route. And I don't think Kirby Dach is that player. Joel Edmondson, LOL, is that player. That would
Josh
be
Anderson.
So funny. Don't even. I actually think they would take Josh Anderson.
I think they would too.
Yeah, I think there could be something there where it's a mix of here's a player that you can use to win now, and then here's either a prospect or whatever. There could be something there, but I just think that a player like Alexis Lafreniere has so much to benefit from working with Adam Nicholas, whereas Pierre-Luc Dubois, I don't think there is as much runway in terms of development. I think he's closer to his ceiling than Lafreniere is to his. And then you add that going from Gerard Gallant as your coach to Martin St. Louis might be helpful.
Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, I'm on the Lafreniere to Montreal train, and I'm sure that's going to piss off no one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been circulated here a lot lately. I mean, we had one of the pundits who has made some insane trade proposals. Yep. A couple years ago, he said that they should trade Suzuki for Wayne Simmons, and a couple days ago said they should trade Cole Caufield for Lafreniere.
No,
because that makes sense.
No. There are 2 players I would not include in a Lafreniere trade, and it's those 2. I would trade Slavkovsky for Lafreniere.
Yeah,
I think
it's first round pick for a first round pick. It's understandable.
Yeah, it's literally one for one. But
again, I feel like that probably doesn't appeal as much to the Rangers, right? Because they want to win now, and Slav is a project, right? But,
exactly.
Yeah. It's going to be Josh Anderson.
Oh, yeah, baby. It's going to be Josh Anderson of getting that enough. You just know it.
Oh, my God. And Cole Caufield liked the tweets, the trade thing. And I believe that night scored twice. So he was pissed. He didn't like it. So he liked it and unliked it. So love it from Cole Caufield. We love the spite. All right. That's all we have for you tonight. Thanks so much to Rachel for joining us here, where you can follow her on Twitter. And also, Rachel's got some cool TikToks up now. You can follow her on TikTok. What's the @ on there?
Puck Bucks,
where she's explaining the salary cap and contracts, all that stuff. You can check it out. It's really fun and keeps on getting better content. It's super fun. Anything else that you want to promote, Rachel?
Yeah, you can find me on the Staff and Graph podcast. I'm officially back with a podcast that I started and own. Yeah, we'll be doing that twice a week. So between Twitter and TikTok and the podcast, that's where I'll be. Yeah, I've got draft rankings coming out this week. They're not really my opinion. They're just the draft model that I built based on my masters. And so I'll be interested to kind of see how they compare to other people's and what people think. All
right. Check it out, everyone. Thanks for joining us here tonight, and we'll be back with you on Thursday when the Canadiens take on the Florida Panthers in what every Canadiens fan will really hope is not a 3-point game. Just not a 3-point game. That's all they need to avoid in that one. Get those picks as high as they are, or as high as they can be. We'll see you then.
Game over! Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada's